Imagine, if you will, you live in 1830s Paris.
Morning in Paris, the city awakes.
And every single day, you walk by this building. It's old. It's decrepit. It's maybe covered in some questionable graffiti. But you see something more. You see a building steeped in history, in mystery, maybe even in capital R, romance. And it pisses you off every single day. You walk by this building and people are just letting it fall into disrepair. And so you do the only thing that you can do, which is you write a strongly worded letter followed by a romantic capital R novel about a hunchback, a Romani woman, and a satanic priest. Because when times get hard and you need to rant, what better vehicle than a novel about a Romani woman, a hunchback man, and a satanic priest, and a goat? Of course, I'm talking about Victor Hugo writing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. For Victor Hugo, architecture was something that radicalized him. He was passionate about it, okay? And he was passionate about Notre Dame. Notre Dame was a cathedral in Paris. I think we have all heard of it. It is a cathedral in Paris. And at the time that Victor Hugo was bebopping around in Paris in the 1820s, 1830s, it had fallen into disrepair and it was not being taken care of by the new king. It was kind of just something that kind of fell off their radar, and historic preservation at the time was not really a thing. It was not something, the new king would come and they would basically tear things down, build up new things in their image. And architecture was the way to get your message for a lot of these kingdoms, these societies, your religious message or your "my king is great, please don't overthrow him" message across to the largely illiterate masses. And it would change with taste, it would change with ideologies over time. And that was something that apparently really pissed Victor Hugo off. Okay. He was like, why is nobody protecting this building? Why are people just letting it fall into disrepair? Have you not read the history books? Okay. What are we doing? And that is something personally why I decided to make this video, because I relate to that a lot. I love a rant, and so does Victor Hugo. And The Hunchback of Notre Dame, really thinking back to it, as probably the title of this video says, it kind of radicalized me in the way that I think a lot of Disney movies radicalized my generation, just by reminding us that you're supposed to actually be a fucking good person and not, bully people or oppress them just because they're different than you, which is apparently a radical idea. And so, yeah, I wanted to revisit The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to do a deep dive into book versus movie and how these two pieces of art, in the same way that the art of Notre Dame radicalized Victor Hugo into action, mayhaps there are lessons that we can take from both the novel Hunchback of Notre Dame and the 1996 cinematic classic Hunchback of Notre Dame by Disney. I think, you know what we need? A random ramble about French Romanticism, okay? And I mean capital R, Romanticism. Victor Hugo was a part of the Romanticism movement of the 18th and 19th centuries. Particularly, he is probably one of the most famous authors of French Romanticism specifically. And in France, it actually came about later than in other areas of Europe. And French Romanticism in particular has this flavor of revolutionary ideals. But Romanticism itself was kind of a reaction to the neoclassical and rationalism thoughts that came before it with the Enlightenment and the Renaissance. So these literary movements before Victor Hugo focused on ideals of order and beauty, kind of those, and very classic Greek and Roman ideas. And Romanticism was giving way from that kind of like focus on reason and rationality and leaning more into the emotional side of things and the individual, and in particular, the transcendental power of art and the artist. And you can see this in Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's a great example of capital R romantic literature because it focuses on, right, the typical kind of like hero and heroine. There's a lot of like emotionality and people being overcome by their emotions, either for ill in the case of Frollo or for their own detriment, but, you know, admirably, I guess, in the case of Esmeralda, who is just too pure and loving for this world. Oh my God. You can also see in romantic art a focus on the aspects of the heroic and the ideal in places that you might not expect. In Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame, this is through our focus on protagonists that are otherwise kind of outcasted from society and would not typically be people that would be taking center stage to have kind of that role as the hero or protagonist in the novel, like Esmeralda, Gringoire, and Quasimodo. They are beggars, they are disabled, they are from marginalized groups in society at the time, and yet they are the ones that are positioned as the innocent, the noble, the virtuous. Even if they make mistakes, even if maybe they creepily stalk people in the dark, they're still the characters that we find ourselves rooting for, sometimes as two wolves are fighting inside of us when we're reading certain poets' perspectives in certain chapters. I have a lot of opinions and also a few kind of like theses floating around in my mind. One of them is this overarching idea of these systems of that outlast the individual, right? There's this idea that these systems of justice and corrupt faith um, are inefficient but long lasting, right? They outlast the individual, and the individual is kind of moved through these systems willy nilly, right? They're not really able to direct their own fate at all or really have any agency if there's someone in society that doesn't have money or power or some kind of authority granted to them by these systems. And I think in the book, right, the thing that I come away from is I think Hugo sets up this interesting counterbalance to that individual versus systems through introducing another system, this idea of something else that is long lasting, um, through the generations to be preserved. And that's this idea of art, right? And specifically Notre Dame as this symbol of France, and artistry and architecture, and but also this place of sanctuary and help for individuals in the community who are outcast and might not find it in other places. Notre Dame is kind of set up as this counterbalance to these other systems that are full of corruption and full of just this astounding kind of lack of heart and care and consideration for an individual if they do not, exactly line up with how the world thinks that they should work. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to dive into, right, how these systems operate in the book, musical, and movie. So it's kind of going to be, this might be a long one. This might be a rambly one, but I think, and it might be a little bit depressing. But I'm going to try to keep it as lighthearted as possible. Again, with the caveat that, like, can you look in my eyes and see the darkness there?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Hugo opens his book at the start of the Feast of Fools. And if you've watched the movie, this is the scene with Topsy-Turvy Day, right? Where it's on the 5th of January, everybody's topsy-turvy. I think that's important to know. But this Feast of Fools, not as much fun as the one from the movie. Okay, in this Feast of Fools, we've got Gringoire, who's been commissioned by the king to put on this morality play. And he's worked really hard on it, and he really, really needs it to go well because he is broke, right? His clothes in tatters, his name on the line, and he is dealing with an angry mob. They're waiting on a bunch of fancy people and some Flemish ambassadors to show up. And the crowd, this part, literally, when I tell you, this was so funny to read because it's literally just this crowd harassing Gringoire, our poet, our intrepid poet, who's kind of a goofball and like kind of a creep, honestly, but who we are supposed to, I guess, root for through most of the book. And they're just they're heckling him. They're threatening to like murder him if he doesn't start this play because they are so damn bored. And so he does. He starts to put on his play, even though it's even though the Flemish ambassadors are not there, and the crowd goes mild, right? They're clapping. Gringoire's like, okay, this is good. This is a good reaction, and they haven't even seen the second act yet. Okay, we've got stage effects coming. We're ready. We're ready to go. Okay. But sadly for Gringoire, okay, there's a heckler in the crowd, Jehan. And Jehan is a scholar and he's a bit of a scamp, okay? And by a bit of, I mean, he is an absolute menace to society. He's burgling taverns. He's seducing wenches. He's getting into fights in the street. He's literally always in trouble and somehow never in jail and never like faces any consequences really for his general mischievousness. But that's probably because his brother is Archdeacon Claude Frollo. That's right. In this one, Frollo is not a judge. He is a priest. He is an archdeacon, and he's got a little bit of a scamp of a brother that he has taken under his wing, and he gives money to on the regs, but has been trying to kind of corral in with some moral lessons. But obviously they're not working because Jehan is in the crowd. He is heckling away. And then there's this beggar that shows up, right? And Jehan is making a spectacle. The beggar is making a spectacle. The beggar whips off his clothes. It's Clopin, Truffaut. You know, the little puppet master guy from the movie. He's in this book too. I mean, that makes sense because why wouldn't he be in the book and also the movie? But he's in this too because he is the king of the outcasts. So they show up and it's like, oh my God, it's Clopin Truffaut. Can you believe? And you know, there's all this going on, and Gringoire is distraught because he's like, what about my play? Okay, what about my masterpiece? And the crowd is losing attention. And then the Flemish ambassadors show up, okay, and one of them is like, okay, enough of this play, I'm bored, and let's do a competition where everybody makes a funny face, and we'll see who's got the funniest face, and they get to be the king of fools because that's how we do things in Fleming, Flanders, Flemland. I don't actually know what Flemish is, and I probably should have looked it up before, but this is the kind of dedicated journalism that you're getting from me. So the Flemish ambassador is like, let's have a competition. Everybody makes a funny face, and this is the same as the movie. Quasimodo shows up to make just his regular face, and people are like, whoa, gnarly, you win, right? You win. And so again, they take him through, it's the same, right? They take him through the streets, and then Frollo shows up and is like, absolutely not. You go back to the bell tower right now, okay? You go back right now. So this first section of the book is really where we get introduced to Gringoire. That is really the point of this section. And then we get introduced to two of our other main characters, Frollo and Quasimodo. In this version of the story, Frollo is an archdeacon, and he's not just a priest. He's also a priest that studies the dark arts, okay? He does, I mean, not really dark arts. He studies alchemy, right? Like he has a thirst for knowledge, and other things later, but a thirst for knowledge that cannot be quenched. And he has studied philosophy, medicine, religion, and now he's on alchemy. He's like, I've transcended the standard fare, and now we're on some alchemy shit. See, here's the thing about the alchemy, okay? And this is a ramble, but that's okay. Okay. It's okay. It's okay that I'm rambling. It's okay that I'm rambling because that's what Victor Hugo would want. He would want me to have an aside for a rant. Okay. And this is that rant. The alchemy never comes into play. And I was really disappointed by how little the alchemy came into play because they talked about it so much. And Victor Hugo really tantalized me with it. Okay. I felt like I was learning so much about alchemy. We talked about Nicholas Flamel and how his he built like a little shack inside of Notre Dame or something to claim sanctuary at some point, and like he buried things in the ground. And I thought we were going to get more alchemy. Okay. I thought Frollo was going to be like, I'm summoning the fires of hell to capture Esmeralda or something. You know, like I really thought something was going to happen with it, but it was just fluff. It was just character flavor, which I mean, fair, because it was great character flavor. I was intrigued by all of the weird skulls and alembics and other such alchemy trinkets in his study because I was always wondering what he was going to do with them later. Um, but yeah, just so you know, he is an alchemist. It doesn't come into play later. I guess that makes sense because alchemy isn't real.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine. And you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I just wanted a little bit of alchemy. I just wanted a little bit of alchemy. In the book, Frollo is truly a priest. He is the archdeacon. In the movie, they instead make him a judge, I think because they felt a little bit weird about having a priest be the villain. I don't really know. And this is for an American audience in the 90s, so I think they didn't want to set up the church as a potential villain, and instead the state becomes the villain in the movies because Frollo very much acts, especially in the movie, as a force of the state. He is the law, right? He is the one directing guards. He is the one arresting people, conducting trials, and deciding who is allowed in the city, who's allowed to exist within its walls, and who even is allowed to live and die, really. So he is that kind of authoritative hand of the state in this movie. Like you start the movie and Frollo immediately is targeting this group of Romani people because he says they are bringing in outside influences. They're not like other people. They're corrupting influence, right? And you're set up with this very vivid image right at the beginning of Frollo chasing this family who is trying to seek sanctuary, literally ends up trying to seek sanctuary at the steps of Notre Dame. And the song is a banger, but I also just remember that scene as a kid, right? And the priest is like holding Quasimodo's mom's like dead body in his arms and is like, you did this, and like you did it in this holy place. Yeah, the thing that was so sad, even more honestly, than watching it again the second time, was because as a kid, I knew, and it was obvious, right? You watch the movie and Frollo is the bad guy, right? Like you start out on a scene, and the scene in which he is introduced as a villain, he is actively pursuing these Romani people that are seeking safe passage to Paris. They have no papers, and they are just a family with a baby. And he pursues them, and they end up, Quasimodo's mom ends up dying on the steps of Notre Dame because he chased her and dragged her back while she was pounding on the church doors asking for sanctuary, and she dies. Um, yeah, and I just was also really just struck by, seeing that scene especially, and then just the entire message being that people who are outcast, people who don't look like you, people who have a different culture than you are not bad just because they have a different culture. Like the scenes where there is a farmer and he's hiding Romani people in his home, and Frollo sets it on fire because you're not allowed to hide people in your home, I guess. Now, I don't know that people would have realized that Frollo was supposed to be the bad guy from the beginning. They would have been like, yeah, I guess, where are their papers? Why didn't they comply? Why were they even trying to come in Paris? They should leave. And that was a really awful thing. And I'm laughing because it was literally so awful watching it, and it was like a gut punch. Frollo is like the worst Disney villain. And now, do you know what I'm saying? And now it's like the things that Frollo did in the first 5 minutes of the movie to set him up as the big bad villain. Like the equivalent of kicking the puppy in the movie, that now you could show that to people and I think that they would recognize that he was being set up to be the bad guy, but they would immediately be like, this is some liberal propaganda. Okay, they're trying to make you feel bad about following the law. And it seems astounding, right? This idea that Frollo could perhaps not be seen as the villain during this time in which we live. But honestly, thinking back to how things were in the 80s and 90s in the United States, or in the 1820s in France, or in the 1400s in France, right? We are who we have always been. And this idea of Frollo and the state in conflict with these ideas of humanity and sanctuary represented by the church in the 1990s version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame might not actually be that far removed from the time period in which it was created in American history. In the 1980s, there was an influx of migrants from Central America fleeing generalized violence due to civil wars in El Salvador and Guatemala, as well as violent revolutions in Nicaragua. And in response to this increase in migrants at the southern U.S. border, the Reagan administration at the time, as well as the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, created a series of increasingly repressive and hostile immigration policies that led to these Central American migrants being detained and deported and sent back to the countries where they faced violence and potentially death. In response to these repressive policies, public backlash and outcry led to the development of what's now known as the sanctuary movement. And this was a movement fostered by churches, local governments, local communities in order to create a place of welcome and refuge for individuals who were fleeing violence and death through no fault of their own. And I'm saying all of this to say, this was not very removed from the period of time in which The Hunchback of Notre Dame was made. And the policies and the ideals that formed the backbone of the sanctuary movement came from things like both in our American history, like the Quakers and the Civil Rights Movement, the Underground Railroad, but also the churches stepped in due to these ideals of sanctuary, right? This idea that individuals who are seeking sanctuary in the church, whether they are from whatever walk of life they are from, whoever can find sanctuary within those walls of the church. And this is an idea that comes from, yes, medieval Christianity, and is the same underpinning which we see all through The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So I say all of that to say, we are who we have always been, both for better and worse. And Frollo was always a villain in Victor Hugo's time, in medieval France, in the 1990s, and now. And there has always been that conflict between authority, right? Between the state and authoritarianism and humanity and human dignity and compassion. Anyways, so Frollo is a priest. He's got a brother. He is very much like the embodiment of what a priest should not be, right? Like, he is not kind. He is not considerate. He does not care for the poor. He's after knowledge and whatever he wants, right? And what he wants is Esmeralda. And he's going to use all of kind of the authority and power like that he has in order to bend her to his will, right? So he's going to leave her. He's basically throughout the story kind of taking away all of Esmeralda's options and is like, pick me, choose me, or the pyre, choose me or the gallows. Esmeralda is like, I'd literally rather die. This man, the thirst that this man has for Esmeralda, it is unparalleled levels of like obsession. Okay, like it is foul. It made me feel physically ill. He's like literally like constantly like on the ground at her feet, like, please just literally look at me kindly or I will die. And Esmeralda is like, then die. He literally like is described constantly as just being like on fire. And I'm like, this man, I feel like this man just gives me the vibes that he is sweaty. Like he's just he literally just like lurks. And Esmeralda knows that he is there watching her play the tambourine in the street all the time. But our man is just there staring at her, looking angry all of the time at Esmeralda. And she's literally like, yeah, there's two people in town that hates me. One of them is this lady that hates all Romani, and then the other is this priest that just glares at me all the time when I play the tambourine. And it's literally Frollo, and in multiple scenes he's just like hanging back in the shadows, like glaring at her. Like that is what he does. And then he's like, why don't you love me? Like, oh my god. Every man in this book is gross. Okay, Gringoire, gross. Okay, we'll get to him. Quasimodo, sad. Frollo, disgusting. Throw him in the fires of hell. Okay, throw the whole man away. Jehan, disgusting. Phoebus, somewhere deeper than hell. Honestly, like fuck that man. Every man in this book, trash. The only being in this entire book that is worth anything to me is the goat. Okay? The goat, and I did like Clopin. Hot take, I did like Clopin. So that's Frollo. And Frollo is really set up as this arm of the state. I think both in the book and in the movie, he is very much this like authoritarian. He is meant to represent our system of justice, right? And how the wants and needs of an individual person with power can inflict great harm, right? They can use these systems to kind of make the lives of everyone around them hell. And there is no recourse because they have all the power and the people that they are preying on have none in this system of justice that is set up. Gringoire. So Gringoire, he follows the procession and he is having a hard time because he is out of money and he doesn't know. He's like, I'm probably not going to get paid for this. It went terribly. You know, at the end, it was literally like one person
watching his play. And so he's like, I'm not getting paid for this. And I'm basically broke. So he wanders out into the night and he runs into La Esmeralda, who is a Romani girl who is 16 years old in the books. And everyone else is frighteningly older than her. I think Frollo is like 35, Quasimodo is 20, Gringoire, I'm pretty sure, is old. I don't know. He gives old creepy man vibes, okay? Anyways, and so Esmeralda is the talk of the town, okay? Everybody loves Esmeralda. She is beautiful. She plays her tambourine like nobody's business. She dances and she sings. And she's got a really cute little goat. Okay, that's right. The goat is in this book. And I will let you know, the goat is the best part of this whole book. Okay, I literally was like physically anxious at the thought of something happening to this goat. Jolly is so loyal to Esmeralda and he does tricks, okay? He knows how to tell time and how to make fun of like political officials by like pretending to walk like they do. Like, he's adorable, okay? And talented, and he comes in clutch, okay? And there were multiple moments where I was like, Victor Hugo, I swear to God, if you kill this goat, okay, I am figuring out how to revive your soul from wherever it is. And I am like, I will annihilate you, okay? Because I love that goat that much, okay? Me and Gringoire are Jolly's #1 fans. And there were multiple moments in the book where Victor Hugo got me, okay? Where I was like, I'm about to watch this goat die and I'm gonna flip a table and I'm gonna have nobody to talk to about it. So I'm talking to you about it right now. And that's on goat business. Anyways, so Esmeralda is playing the tambourine and Gringoire is watching her. And when she finishes, for some reason, Gringoire decides to follow her. He's like, Romani women are nice. And I'm broke, right? So I'll just follow her and she'll probably give me somewhere nice to sleep. When I tell you, this book is full of disgusting men. Okay? If there's one thing this book is full of, it's disgusting men. And Gringoire, I honestly was really this was the first part of the book that pissed me off, okay? Because we're following Gringoire. I was having a great time, okay, with this little silly poet man who had a terrible day. And then all of a sudden he's stalking this little Romani girl, okay, this freaking teenager, through the streets at night. It is dark and Esmeralda is on her own with her little goat, who's a hero, okay? Gringoire thinks for some reason that it's a good idea to follow her at a distance. And this is really the point in the book that I want to highlight, where the people without power in this book, in this instance, Esmeralda, and oftentimes like Quasimodo, the people in this book without power, constantly, they have no sense of agency, right? They are swept along by the whims of individuals who have more like social power over them, or like physical power over them, monetary or like systemic power over them. And Esmeralda faces this to the extreme. And this is the first instance of that, right? Because she is walking alone at night and she is facing perils on every side, from the law, who doesn't give a fuck about her and is constantly looking at her sideways and waiting for her to do something that they can say, of course you would, you're, Romani scum, we're gonna snatch you up. Or by men who are constantly like eyeing her because she's beautiful and waiting for her to show some kind of either invitation or moment of weakness, moment of just not having her guard up so that they can step in. And that's what happens in this moment, right? So we've got Gringoire on one side being shady as hell. And when I say I was livid having to be in this man's perspective, because he is a creepy motherfucker. All of the men in this book, except for Quasimodo, are creepy motherfuckers. Because he's literally sitting there, and being in his perspective, I was like, okay, at least like on the surface level, right? He is thinking, I do not want to harm Esmeralda. I just want to see if she will give me respite. And in my mind, it's like, okay, he's saying that to try to be like, oh, it's so innocent. You know, like I'm just wanting to see if she'll take care of me in a platonic way. But I see through you, Gringoire. I know what you want, and you're disgusting. Criminal. Jail.
Right to jail, right away.
The only thing we have in common is that we like that goat. Anyways, so you've got Gringoire on one side being creepy and shady as hell, and if we weren't in his perspective, I would be advocating that Esmeralda drop kick him to the great beyond, because fuck him. Then on the other side, we've got Esmeralda walking into the night, and then all of a sudden, bam, snatched. This was another moment where I was enraged, okay? Because who snatches her up? Quasimodo. And I was livid because I was like, how dare you take my sweet little bean, Quasimodo, who was the reason that I read this book, right? And you're going to turn him into a sexual assaulter? Like all of the other goddamn men in this book? Will I have no peace? Will there be no man to root for? But no, that is not what is happening. He was snatching her for Frollo, and Frollo was there. And Frollo just ran off when Quasimodo got caught. Esmeralda gets snatched, okay? Attempted to get snatched by Quasimodo. And she is saved, not by Gringoire, who does literally fuck all. Who literally, I think, makes eye contact with Esmeralda. They're looking at each other, and he's like, I am so sorry, and is get out of there. Useless. Again, Gringoire, fuck you. Like, literally, the only thing he did in this book that I appreciate, like the only thing we have in common is that we both love that goat, and it is because of Gringoire that the goat lives. So that's the only redeeming quality Gringoire has, okay? Otherwise, fuck that man. He's useless and he makes things worse constantly. I just needed to get that off my chest. I didn't realize how heavy I've been carrying that, okay? Anyways, Gringoire does fuck all. So who comes in to save the day? Oh my god, it's fucking Phoebus. And you might already agree with that reaction, okay, if you've watched the movie, because Phoebus in the movie also sucks. Like, he is just really bland and is like, of course, the beautiful blonde man is going to get the woman in the movie and the musical, okay, like that. And is like the counterpart to like poor Quasimodo, who's like crying while he and Esmeralda kiss. Like, okay, like I was already predisposed not to like Phoebus, and I knew going into this that Phoebus sucked. Like I knew, like the only thing I knew about this book going into it was the architecture rants. There were going to be architecture rants, and then the very ending. Like I knew what happened at the end. So I knew that Phoebus sucked. And so Phoebus swoops in, gross, and he saves the day. And Esmeralda has heart eyes for this man immediately, to a level to which I think should be studied. Okay? I was baffled. I was like, truly, is it possible for someone's brain to dissolve to mush over one mildly attractive man? And a cop at that. I mean, oh my god. But she immediately is like, oh my god, he saved me, and like, we're gonna be together forever. And is obsessed with him for the rest of the book. What? So Esmeralda is saved by Phoebus, and Gringoire continues trying to fucking follow her. He like just waits a little bit. He ran away. He got in this whole like kerfuffle, and he mentions that like kind of like the area that he's in, he goes into like a seedier area, and it turns out that the people that he was approached who were begging, were pretending to be blind. They were pretending to have crutches, and so they chase after him, and he winds up in the Court of Miracles. which is not in the catacombs of Paris like it is in the movie and the musical, which is sad. Okay, I mean, to be fair, I don't know. I think Victor Hugo was maybe going for more realism, and it is still kind of like in like a cemetery. Like it gets very spooky and dark as Gringoire is walking through, so it gets very gothic and creepy. I did like the descriptions, like the sense of kind of like dread as Gringoire is running into the Court of Miracles. And then we get to this like tavern where all of the outcasts of the town kind of have come together, and they have like their little kings and dukes and such, and they're kind of like holding court. And this is where we run back into who probably is honestly one of my favorite characters is Clopin. Clopin knows what he's about, okay? He's the king of the outcasts, of one sect of the outcasts. And when Gringoire comes in, he basically clocks him immediately as a useless motherfucker. I had two wolves fighting to the death inside of me, because I'm going to preface this with, if you were going to read Notre Dame de Paris, please go in advised the amount of racial stereotypes against like Jewish people, against Romani people, against people from like freaking like Hungary. I was like, wow, I forgot how racist some of these stereotypes were, and they do not make sense to me reading it as someone in 2026, like literally at all. And I'm like, why would you think that people, just because they are from somewhere else or they're like a transient population, that they're going to kidnap your children? Why would you think that? Like, so just know going into it, the level of racial stereotypes, especially in this section, astronomical. So on the one hand, I felt like I was constantly having to like bat away, like, you know, like Gringoire would say something, but I already fucking hated Gringoire, you know? So whenever Gringoire was racist, I was just kind of like, or like Frollo or anybody, I was kind of just like, honestly, like, literally, what do you know? Like, fuck you.
Right to jail, right away.
They have this entire system set up, which is like a counterpoint to the justice system in France. And at one point, I think it's Clopin that even says, France has a justice system set up for us. They hang us for no reason. So why can't we hang you, a Frenchman, for no reason when you come into our territory? Because justice isn't there for us. Why should it be there for you? Right? And I found that statement and the way that the Court of Miracles was set up so interesting. Because again, there is so much like racial stereotypes in this book, but then at the same time, the outcasts, they are set up in a lot of ways as more just and more fair than these systems of like civilized French society, because they don't hang Gringoire when he shows up. I mean, they tease him about it and they make him look stupid, but they put him through a test. They're like, if you can prove yourself useful to us, we don't really care who you are, where you came from. We don't care that you're a poet. We don't care that you wrote plays for the king. And we don't care that you're broke. And we like, all we care about is if you're useful. And that usefulness doesn't look like usefulness or power in French society at all, right? Because you have individuals who, you know, if you do have a disability, if you're blind or if you can't walk, or, you know, if you're not part of like the French peasant class, typical French peasant class, you know, if you don't speak the same language as everybody else, it doesn't really matter, because some of those things can be a benefit. It is presented as, we will give you an opportunity to prove yourself useful to us. And if you do, like, we don't really care about anything. Like, then you're one of ours and we will protect you and trust you, you know? Whereas in France, like in the regular side of Paris, right? Like it is so much harder to transcend those barriers and to get power if you don't already come from a place where you can get it through money or station or whatever. So I just thought that was really interesting because I don't know if it was just me reading my own interpretation into it, because I constantly throughout the book was like, the people that I am siding with, even though they are not necessarily any better, the outcasts, the Court of Miracles people, they constantly are showing up. They're showing up for their own, and they are trying to be fair, and they're welcoming people who, they're not as discriminating as other sides. And their system of justice, while harsh, is fair. So when Gringoire shows up, they basically say, we can't rob you, we're going to hang you. And we will keep you from being hanged if you can pass this test. And they try to make him steal something from a really high up place on one foot and not make any jingle jangle sounds. And he obviously fails spectacularly, falls to the ground, because Gringoire he's not useless. Okay, but he's a loser. He's a loser, so he fails their test. And then they're like, okay, well, I mean, second chance. Okay. We won't hang you if one of our women decides that they want to marry you. None of the women want to marry him. They're all like, he's too old, he's too ugly, he's too poor, whatever. Am I about to watch Gringoire get killed by this group of people? Because I don't know how to feel about that. I don't really want him to die, just because I don't really want the Court of Miracles people to be responsible for killing him, because I feel like that would make them look bad. And I was like, I'm kind of rooting for them because they're kind of a vibe and they're kind of silly. And I think they're just messing with him. But it doesn't matter, because Esmeralda comes in and the crowd parts, right? And they're like, oh my God, it's La Esmeralda. And they're like, do you want him? And she's like, yeah, I guess so. I'll marry him. He is like, this is literally the luckiest I've ever been, ever. I get this hot girl and I get to live, and she's got a sick goat. So they do this thing where Esmeralda smashes a plate on the ground. It breaks into four pieces. So that means that her and Gringoire are married for 4 years. It's like a temporary marriage. So he goes back to Esmeralda's house, and immediately, what do you think this man does? I'm going to give you a moment to just think about it. If you guessed he tries to fuck her, you're right.
Right to jail, right away.
Was like, oh, she wants to marry me, so obviously she wants to fuck me. And Esmeralda is like, ew, disgusting. No, you're like my brother now. Don't touch me. This was the point. I didn't know Esmeralda's character yet, and I was like, okay, I like it. Picasso, she's standing up for herself against this man. She saved him just because she was like, I didn't want to watch them kill somebody. So I was like, okay, I'll save you. And then, maybe we can protect each other, but I don't want to fuck you. And so then Gringoire is left to bond with the only person who is interested in him at all, which is the goat. And Esmeralda is already obsessed with Phoebus. So, yay.
And now I think that we need to shift to Quasimodo and talk a little bit about. So we talked a little bit about the dangers and perils in the world that Esmeralda is facing, both as a marginalized individual, right? People are looking at her sideways and with suspicion just on the basis of her being Romani, looking down on her for being a street performer. And then also the added danger of being a woman, which puts her in peril and conflict with all of these forces of authority, right? That are impacting her ability as an individual to decide her own fate. We have that on the one hand. On the other hand, one of our other outcasts in the story is Quasimodo, who we have just learned attempted to snatch Esmeralda, and in doing so got snatched himself by the law. And this is a scene that is, again, I had two wolves fighting inside of me, because the way that Victor Hugo presents the court system of medieval France is truly it is comical in the chaoticness of it, right? And in just the true unfairness of this system, right? It is set up to make pompous and silly men who have been put into these roles feel good about themselves in spite of their own insecurities and shortcomings that make them, in many cases, unable to deliver justice in a way that is fair, especially when it comes to the case of Quasimodo. And so we see this, right? We get a history lesson a little bit in the book about the courts and jurisdictions of Paris and how it's very complicated and they all kind of fall under different jurisdictions because some of them are like a church jurisdiction and some of them are, through the king and through the state. And depending on what the crime is and where it happened, it's kind of different judges for every different day, it seems like. And it was very confusing to follow. But the point is, all you really need to know is that it is meant to be confusing and is meant to feel silly and impersonal. Again, because we have these individuals that are being swept along by the forces of fate and systemic power and are trying their best to kind of carve their own path and at every turn are being kind of stomped on. In this case, we see that very clearly in Quasimodo's court case. In the book, it's important to note that Quasimodo is deaf because he has been a bell ringer since Frollo brought him in as a foundling and raised him, right? He put him in the tower and left him to become a bell ringer. And in doing so, Quasimodo got a great deal of strength. Like he almost has like superhuman kind of animalistic strength in the book. And I think you kind of see that in the Disney adaptation as well, right? In that scene where he's like pulling at the chains to save Esmeralda and like kind of like breaks the stone columns. It's kind of implied that he has that supernatural strength from swinging around all those heavy bells for his whole life. But also because he has been in the bell tower with those loud bells ringing in his ears, at one point, after Frollo teaches him how to speak and a little bit how to read, his eardrums actually shatter, right? So it's this kind of, again, like a cruel twist of fate, right? Like this thing that provided him comfort and purpose and meaning, and this thing that he loves, which is the bell tower and the bells of Notre Dame, which he considers, he names the bells, he considers them his friends, and this thing that these beings that he loves very much. They are also the thing that have taken away his source of connection to the rest of society and have made it very difficult for him to communicate in a way that constantly comes back to bite him in the book, right? Because these systems are not set up to navigate his, I don't even really want to say, like, to navigate his deafness with any kind of care, right? These systems are set up to punish difference. And so Quasimodo goes to the court and is asked questions that he is unable to answer, right? They ask him what his he answers assuming what the question will be, because that is how he has navigated the world his whole life, right? Like he assumes when somebody meets him for the first time, they're going to ask him his name or what he's doing, and so he'll answer the questions that he thinks people are asking based on the situation. But then if it doesn't play by the script that he is assuming is happening, he is very much at a loss. Plot twist: the judge that is overseeing Quasimodo's case is also hard of hearing and cannot understand what the accused say. He relies on his notes. In order to pass judgments on these criminals. And so it sets up this very kind of comical scene for those who are in the courtroom watching, because Quasimodo is answering a question that was not asked, and the judge is very obviously not recognizing that Quasimodo is giving him answers that don't make sense. So everyone else knows that something is wrong and that Quasimodo is deaf and so can't really answer. But the judge, feeling insecure because everyone is laughing at him, instead of just sentencing Quasimodo to the pillory, he adds on extra time to his punishment, gives someone a harsher punishment than they deserve. So again, it's just another instance in the book of, because an individual is not, does not just automatically mesh into how society thinks that they should function, or how society is set up to deal with kind of the masses, to just kind of move them through the system as quickly as possible without really, taking care of what that individual needs or what their individual circumstances might be. It again just really, it is the first in a series of injustices.
And of course, we in the United States would know absolutely nothing about an unfair and oftentimes nonsensical justice system that would do things like hold court for individuals who are incapable of understanding what is going on in their own court case for whatever reason, or be unjust in our distribution of justice for some and not for others.
Anyways, so Quasimodo is sentenced to this punishment, and a little bit extra because, just because. And this is the scene, right? So in the Disney movie, this scene was combined with the Feast of Fools, right? And it's the masses who turn on Quasimodo and make fun of him. And while the masses do make fun of him in the first scene of the book as well, right? Like, this is actually the scene where Esmeralda steps in to his rescue, right? And so Quasimodo is pilloried, right? He's tied up, he's beaten, and he is begging for water. And I was alternating between reading the book and listening to an audiobook version of it. And I will say the audiobook version, the narrator really sold it. Like, I felt very bad for Quasimodo. Everyone was just kind of, because it's described as everyone is just standing around Quasimodo and nobody is giving him any care or consideration. They're treating him worse than an animal, really, because he is like begging for just a drink. And they're like, you can drink out of the gutter, like, you're scum. And then the crowd parts and we see Esmeralda. And she's described like almost as angelic, right? Walking to Quasimodo, and Quasimodo looks at Esmeralda and is like, well, fuck. She's probably here to beat me up too, because I tried to snatch her off the street, and honestly justified. Like, she should beat me up. He is very much like, okay, I know what's going to happen. And fair. And I was like, yeah, honestly fair. I mean, if she did want to, like, spit in your face or something, like, I mean, you did try to snatch her up off the street, but she doesn't do that. Okay. She walks up to Quasimodo and she gives him a drink of water, and she shows him kindness and compassion where no one else does. Right. And this is a point that I think the movie and the book differ, but I think that slight difference is important to point out, because I think that it does end up making a pretty significant difference in some of the tones and themes of the book and in Esmeralda's character herself, right? So in the Disney version of Esmeralda, we have this spunky heroine who is passionate about protecting her people, about living a free life, and being able to move through the world without feeling the oppressive hand of the state at every turn, when she is just trying to live her life with her people. And we have that iconic scene where she demands that Frollo let Quasimodo go, because Frollo is overseeing the Feast of Fools in the movie version. And when Quasimodo is just kind of minding his own business and gets strapped down and thrown, and the townspeople start throwing vegetables at him, Frollo's like, let him keep going for a little bit longer, because he wants Quasimodo to learn his lesson. And so Esmeralda hops up onto the podium and is like, let him go. We deserve justice, right? And we have that scene where he's like, or I'll have order, and Esmeralda's like, justice,
Mistreat this poor boy the same way you mistreat my people. You speak of justice, yet you are cruel to those most in need of your help.
Silence!
Justice!
And in that moment is when Frollo takes notice of Esmeralda. He's already hated the Romani this whole movie, But, right, like he wants to squash them like ants, and he makes that known in the first 3 minutes of the movie version. But in the movie, this is the moment when Frollo takes special interest in Esmeralda. In her little dance, he's attracted to her. And then in this moment, she embarrasses him. She shows that she is better than this judge who is overseeing the festival, because she has shown more care and consideration for Quasimodo's dignity than the man who is supposed to be his caretaker, right? And who is supposed to have this moral authority over the citizens of Paris, compared to a lowly Romani woman that people think is a witch or a criminal. In the book, Frollo is not here. He is not the forefront of the scene, right? And Esmeralda in the book is more set up to be kind of like a passive angelic figure. This sets up an interesting difference from the movie, because Esmeralda is not doing this because, I mean, she's doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it's more in a way, it's like subtle, but it's less in a way of like, it's the right thing to do because justice, and I will have justice for my people and for anyone who is outcast, and this is wrong, and we are just as good as anyone else in Paris. And hers is more like this, like, sentiment from this, like, kind of sentimentalist perspective. And I mean sentimentalist in terms of like the literary movement of sentimentalism, which again is kind of like known for having lots of these like innocent, angelic little waifs who are too pure for the world and always so kind and will give you their last coin and then die in the street alone. Right? That is the vision of Esmeralda that we are getting. I didn't particularly love it. I knew going into it that probably because, right, sentimentalism kind of coexisted and grew into, like, melded with romanticism, because sentimentalism is like 1740s France, and then romanticism was right after. So I was kind of expecting that the heroine would act in this way. But I do just want to point it out because I do think that the movie version of Esmeralda as a character is a lot stronger in that way, because her focus as a character is that sense of justice and equality and fairness, right? And overcoming the oppressive hand of the state through individual action and collective community action, and taking care of your community and creating a wider community, right? Like recognizing that your difference and marginalization is also being impacted by another's outcastness and marginalization. And that if you come together and support one another, you're stronger, right? That's the message of the movie. Not necessarily, I mean, in some ways, I think you could argue it's the message of the book, but it is not Esmeralda's message. Esmeralda is focused on one thing, and it is fucking Phoebus.
And before we move on, I gotta take a second to talk about Gudule, okay? Gudule is a recluse who has gone mad and lives in a cell that overlooks the Place de Grève, so the public square where public punishments and executions take place in Paris. And Gudule is one of the two people in town that absolutely cannot stand Esmeralda. For Gudule, this is because she cannot stand literally any Romani. Gudule has a grudge against all Romani because when she lived in a small village outside of Paris, a group of Romani came in and allegedly stole away her daughter to do apparently great evil with, according to Gudule. I don't know. Not only is this a frustrating stereotype, but we are going to hear about it so much in the narrative, and don't worry, we're going to have a whole rant about it in a second. But the important thing to know in this scene is that Gudule looks out at Esmeralda walking up the steps to offer Quasimodo 1 ounce of compassion, and she raises her voice so that Esmeralda can hear her from her cell and yells out a curse. And she tells Esmeralda that
So too, as you climb up the gallows on this day, you will climb one more time to meet your grave.
So basically, curses her to say that she's going to die and be executed because she is a Romani. And Esmeralda hears this and is very like overcome with fear in this moment. And really, that's all you need to know about Gudul right now. Yeah, we're about to. We got to rant. Okay, we got to wrap it up because we got to have a rant. Okay, let's get ready.
And this is another rant, and this one is directed at the Romantics and Victor Hugo specifically, so he might not approve of this one. But there are so many things that annoy me to no end because they are just bad plot devices, but they are ones that have lived on like awful, horrible Frankenstein monsters, okay? And one of them is this trope. These tropes that are just kind of rooted in both classism and racism. And this idea that like if you are going to be good, you have to be specifically white and possibly noble, or at least landowning. And this comes up in a lot in romantic literature. Okay, this is a trope in both romantic literature and kind of like the sensibility, sentimentalist literature. But it is a very common trope that like there are female characters in the book that are usually like they fall from grace, but they are a noble woman, so they have this innate purity in their heart. Or you think they're a waif, but they're secretly a noble, so that's why they have such a good heart, because poor people don't. Or, you think that they are a Romani little street urchin, but they are not. No. They are white. So that's why they are so good, because they were white this whole time. And that is what the book presents, right? So as Esmeralda and Quasimodo, and again, oh my God, when I tell you how many times I was just like fuming, because in the book, Victor Hugo like presents this, like constantly just drops this as like, hey, here's a long ramble about this random noblewoman and this random woman that lives in this village, and also this random widow that is like in this cell. I wonder why that's relevant. It couldn't be because Esmeralda secretly was snatched as a baby and replaced with Quasimodo, who then this lady took to a foundling orphanage where he was picked up by Frollo. So the unsupernaturally beautiful and innocent and kind little heroine is white. That all of the men love is white, is French, and her mother owns land. She owns a parcel of land given to her by her brother. Oh my God. And when I tell you, the reason I was so frustrated with this is because not only is it constantly hammered throughout the book that like, hey, Esmeralda has this secret pouch that's got a fucking baby shoe in it. And she's being really good and not having sex with men because she thinks that her parents are going to come find her. So the whole premise of her like goodness is because, which again, the whole premise of her goodness being that she's a virgin. Anyways, yeah, but the whole premise of her goodness is literally based on that she's trying to like, that she has this idea of herself that she is not like part of the court of miracles, the outcast, the Romani, in the same way that everybody else is, and she's waiting for her parents to come get her. I hated it. There's just so many things about the secret white baby plotline that just suck. One, I think it's terrible for both Quasimodo and Esmeralda's character. I think it makes them weaker characters overall. I think Disney did it better, right? I think in both versions, that they have, right? In the musical, Quasimodo is Jehan's son. Again, like he had Quasimodo with a Romani woman, but it's Jehan's son, so that Frollo takes care of him because he's, even though he doesn't want to, but it's like Jehan's dying wish. In the movie, which I think is the best version, Quasimodo's mother is killed by Frollo, and Frollo takes a baby in because he is made to feel kind of guilty by the archdeacon. I think that's the best version, right? Like, I think taking him in out of family obligation is fine. But like the musical version, but I think the book is probably the weakest version because he takes him in as a foundling, right? But it's more because he's like worried that Jehan isn't going to be good enough. So he's like, maybe this will counterbalance, right? Like if I do this good deed, it will counterbalance how bad Jehan is. So yeah, I think for Quasimodo's character, it's not good. For Esmeralda's character, it's even worse, right? I really appreciate that both the movie and the musical left Esmeralda as a Romani woman. I think that makes the story stronger, right? Because you've set up that like all of these systems don't really care about the individual, and it's like outcasts, like, you know, and for the function of the story, Esmeralda is treated as a Romani woman through the entire story. People are quick to assume that she's a witch. She is like constantly discriminated against or assumed to be like seducing people, enchanting people, or to be untrustworthy because of her status in society. So functionally, it doesn't matter that she is not really a part of the, you know, she wasn't supposed to originally be part of the Court of Miracles. She was stolen away. But it doesn't make sense because in the function of the narrative, it doesn't matter. And then what is the moral of the story that we are supposed to be taking away from that? That you should be nice to people because they could secretly be white? Stupid. Dumb. Doesn't make sense.
And so a few months pass, and Esmeralda goes back to her normal routine of playing the tambourine and getting her goat to do amazing little tricks. And one night, she hears someone call out to her to come into their home. And oh my God, would you believe who it is? It's fucking Phoebus, okay? Phoebus is in the home of his fiancée, a woman named Fleur de Lis, which I am going to pronounce horribly the rest of this video. And Fleur sees out on the street this little Romani girl and immediately is like, oh, isn't that the girl that you keep talking about? You rescued her like a couple months ago. We should totally invite her inside, not to make fun of her or anything, just to have her play her little tambourine because I'm not a mean girl at all, obviously. And anyway, so Phoebus calls out to Esmeralda, has her come inside to meet Fleur and Fleur's mom and two of Fleur's friends. And Esmeralda brings her little goat right on in. And she plays her tambourine. The girls are all immediately jealous because obviously Phoebus is into Esmeralda, and obviously Esmeralda is stunningly beautiful and also has an adorable goat. Okay? But would you believe it? There's a kid on the ground and they snatch Jolly's amulet that is around Jolly's neck that he wears all the time and spill it onto the ground. And the goat does a little trick and arranges the letters on the ground. And would you believe it? The letters in that pouch, they form the word Phoebus. Okay, fucking Scrabble tiles of Phoebus this little goat has been carrying around. And I gotta say, for somebody who is constantly in danger of being executed because they've been accused of witchcraft, having a little bag that contains the name of the captain of the guard around your goat's neck, probably not the best look. And obviously, Fleur's mom and Fleur and both of her friends start freaking the fuck out, and they tell Esmeralda to get the hell out of their house because they think she's a witch that's going to curse them. And so Esmeralda leaves humiliated, and Phoebus does nothing but makes a note that he should probably definitely circle back to tap that later. Yeah.
Another thing that I forgot to mention that really creeps me out, okay, is that this whole time, every single time that Phoebus refers to Esmeralda, he is referring to her as my child. And it's disgusting. He's like referring to her as like a child, his little dear child, over and over and over again in all of their interactions. And it made me want to vomit, because he does not call Flora this, and no one else calls Esmeralda my dear child in that context when they are actively trying to seduce her. It's not like Esmeralda is obsessed with Phoebus and in love with him, and Phoebus just doesn't view her that way at all. The moment he sees her and sees that she is down, he assumes down to fuck, but Esmeralda is down to get married and run away together. He like is calling her my child, and it's gross. I just had to put that out there because I really hated it. But okay, that's enough, right? Umber is right. That's enough ragging on Esmeralda and her cute little goat, okay? We gotta move on, because we gotta cut back to our satanic priest and his rapscallion of a little brother. Esmeralda and Phoebus are obviously going to rendezvous at some point in the near future, and that is probably going to turn out great for both of them. Definitely. But meanwhile, Jehan, Frollo's rapscallion little brother, is approaching the archdeacon once again to shake him down for money, because he spent all of his money on wenches and alcohol and general, like, scampness, making bets. general fiscal irresponsibility from Jehan. And so he shows up at Frollo's apartments, and he is getting ready to knock on the door to Frollo's very secret room behind a very secret red door, when he realizes that the door is unlocked and he can just push it open and look at whatever his brother's doing. And then we all get to see there's like weird alchemical things and skulls and scales and texts and things, but what Jehan sees is that he sees that his brother is really going through it, because Frollo at this point in the novel is distraught. This is the book equivalent to when Frollo is singing Hellfire. Okay, Hellfire. Okay, because he is sitting in his study and he has such a look of despair and torment, and he's like holding his head in his hands because he's being tormented by this woman in his visions, right? Because he can't be with her because he's taken vows as a priest, and also she's a Romani woman, so he doesn't really want to anyways, but he doesn't want anyone else to have her, but he wants to have her, but he feels bad about having her, and he feels like he's being consumed by the fires of hell, right? He's described as being very like warm all of the time, and so that just gives me the vibe that Frollo in the books is a very sweaty man. And so Frollo carves into the wall this Greek word, which is, I'm going to pronounce it so wrong, but it's spelled ananke. And this is the idea which is central to what I've been talking about in the book related to Esmeralda and Quasimodo, which is ananke means an immutable destiny that you can't escape, but in a very tragic, unfun kind of way, right? Not in like a, oh my God, we're fated to be together and everything is going to be happy. Not the idea of ananke is like the struggle is eternal and it is fated to happen and you will not escape it. That is the vibe. And we've seen kind of how that idea of these systems of power impact individuals who are outcasted from society through no fault of their own. I would argue that Frollo is experiencing this sense of marching towards this fate that he cannot escape from, but it is very much a fate that is of his own making. He feels this obsession, and the way that it's described in the book by Victor Hugo is as something that is like overwhelming his senses and like driving him insane. But as a modern day reader, I don't know. I just don't have a lot of sympathy for Frollo's madness and to look at it as something that he could not escape from, because there are multiple points in the story where Frollo admits that he could have made a different decision and then admits to himself, but I wouldn't have done anything differently, right? Because at every moment when he is faced with the choice of let Esmeralda live her life or fuck it up because she doesn't want to fuck you, he's going to choose to cause her harm over and over and over again. And Frollo in this situation is an individual who has access to systemic power. Esmeralda and Quasimodo are in a lot of ways victims of their own fate, right? There are all of these outside forces, whether it's other characters in the book or just miscommunications, like circumstances just not lining up how it would be most beneficial for them to be able to move through the plot with as minimal harm as possible, right? Like they keep getting put into these situations where, because of how the systems are set up, they feel that pain and that affliction. Frollo is not in that situation. Frollo is in a position of social authority as an archdeacon, right? He has moral power, he has social power, he has financial power, and also he has the power of and privilege of access to knowledge that other people don't have, right? Like any knowledge that he has wanted to pursue, anything that he's wanted to tackle, he has been able to do so, whether through his own will or through his access to these systems of knowledge and power that have given him access to those things that he desires. And the only thing in his whole life that he has not gotten is Esmeralda. And when he is faced with that idea that there's something that he can't have, not because and there's nothing he can do about it, right? Like there is no level of social status to which he could rise that would make Esmeralda want to be with him. There is no, he could save her life and she's like, I still don't want to be with you, right? There are some things that he just you can't transcend being a loser. That is the situation that we find Frollo in, carving Greek words dramatically into the wall. And Jehan kind of like backs up, shuts the door, and is like, I was not supposed to see that. That was not for me. I've never seen my brother like that before, because to Jehan, Frollo is very holier than thou and constantly giving him lectures about how he should stop carousing and gambling all of his money away. So Frollo in this moment is being confronted by all of his personal moral failings, right? Frollo as an individual is having to come to terms with the fact that even though he has access to all of this power and all of this knowledge, it doesn't really matter, right? Because here he is faced with Jehan, who is, in spite of Frollo's best efforts to raise him in a way that he feels is moral and upright, still doing whatever the hell he wants and gambling and wenching his life away. And then we have Frollo also, before Jehan walks in, dealing with his own personal moral failing of this obsession with Esmeralda, which has led him to being so consumed with thoughts of her and thoughts of seeing her, of being with her, of keeping anyone else from being with her, and upholding her virtue or whatever. He's become so obsessed by these thoughts that it is also deterring him from his goals and his pursuit of knowledge, which is obviously, because he's a secret alchemist, to turn liquid into gold. To turn things into gold, right? That weren't gold before. Whatever, alchemist shit. And so he is like pissed because he's like, I should be able to do this And I can't, because literally all I can think about is Esmeralda, and now my dumb brother is here trying to get money from me. And Jehan has to hide under a table because these people come in and talk to Frollo and whatever. It doesn't really matter. But Jehan gets money and Jehan leaves. Frollo follows Jehan because he's like, I just gave Jehan a fat purse of money in order to keep Jehan from telling anybody that I have been doing alchemy in my secret lair. And so Jehan immediately goes and runs into his good buddy, would you believe it, Phoebus, and is like, let's go get drunk together. Well, Jehan gets way too drunk because Jehan is just living life for a good time, and that's it. Phoebus gets pissed because Jehan passes out, but and Jehan was the one with the money. And so Phoebus is like, if I can't drink, obviously, I've got a rendezvous with Esmeralda. Little does he know that Frollo was following his brother Jehan and therefore following Phoebus, and Frollo realizes that Phoebus is going to meet up with Esmeralda. And Frollo is enraged by this, so enraged that he tries to fight Phoebus in the street, but immediately backs off because he realizes that Phoebus could absolutely curb stomp him. And I would have loved to see it. That would have been the one good thing that Phoebus would have done in the book, honestly. But Phoebus instead, because he's horrible, suggests that when Frollo asks if he's meeting Esmeralda, and it's kind of like, there's no way that you're meeting Esmeralda. Esmeralda would never meet you. She's too good for that kind of thing. And Phoebus is like, want to bet? You can come watch. Literally offers to let Frollo watch and escorts Frollo into this little secret attic crawl space to watch him while Phoebus meets up with Esmeralda to seduce her, to have sex with her. Do you see why I said that Phoebus is the worst? We haven't even gotten to hit the peak. Like, we haven't even reached the pinnacle of how awful Phoebus is going to get, okay? But he sucks. And so Frollo is watching from his little crawl space, like the creepiest man, okay? He is so creepy. The way that it's described in the book, it was viscerally disgusting because Frollo is getting excited, but also angry, right? Like at the same time, those two emotions are mixing together and overwhelming him. I have to say, there were moments in this book that I thought that Victor Hugo was going to cut away from, and he really doesn't. So I was like waiting for the fade to black moment where it was like, okay, we're going to pull back. It's 1830s Paris. Like I'm not about to read about a woman getting graphically assaulted in this book, am I? Well, anyways, so Esmeralda comes in, and Esmeralda thinks that she is there to meet Phoebus because he's decided that he's in love with her. And Phoebus obviously is saying things like, I love you, and we're going to be together forever, and you're the only woman that I love. And then Esmeralda is like, oh, okay, great. Well, I have to be virtuous before I get married because I have this secret amulet full of baby shoes. And the secret amulet full of baby shoes means that I have parents, and my parents might have land. And if I have sex before marriage, then my parents won't, my secret parents that left me these baby shoes might not give me the land, right? Sound logic. And so she is like, I don't want to have sex with you. I want to get married. And Phoebus is like, that's not my thing. It is my thing, but not to you. Encroaching on her personal space and undressing her as they're having this conversation where she's like, no, I need to get married, and no, I'm not comfortable with this, right? And she's like half naked, and then is like, okay, never mind, it's fine. I'll be whatever you want me to be. I'll be your mistress. Of course, I'm not good enough for you to marry. It's fine. And I was losing my mind. I was so mad at Frollo, at Phoebus, at Esmeralda, at Victor Hugo, at the goat. Everyone. What am I about to read? What am I about to curse my eyes with? I literally need to stab someone. And you know who felt the same way? Frollo. Because Frollo pops out of his little attic and he stabs Phoebus in the neck. And Esmeralda, in shock, faints. And as she faints, she feels what she describes as hot, burning something kiss her mouth, which obviously is Frollo being a creep, like literally stabbing a man in the neck and then watching the woman that he is attracted to faint on the ground, and then instead of helping her at all, giving her a very, very sweaty, undoubtedly kiss and booking it off into the night. And so then when Esmeralda wakes up, very confused, she thinks that Phoebus is dead, and she keeps trying to tell people, hey, a priest popped out of the attic and stabbed Phoebus in the neck when I was meeting up with him to confess my undying love to him, and tried to kill him. Is he dead? And everybody's like, no, obviously, Esmeralda, you stabbed him. And also, obviously, it doesn't even really matter if he's dead or if he's alive. We didn't really look into it, and we don't really care. The point is, you stabbed him, and he's probably dead. So they keep telling her, yeah, he's dead. Like, it wasn't looking good, so he's probably dead. So we're just gonna try you for murder now. And again, this is the point at which we are confronted once again with an individual coming to face a justice system that is not set up to believe her, right? It is meant to assume her guilt and put her in her place. And her place was not to be with a captain of the guard, let alone assume that she could marry a captain of the guard, which is what she's telling people. No, she obviously, the Romani woman, would stab a man in the neck because she's a traitor. And also she's got a goat that can tell time. So probably she and that goat are witches and cavorting with the devil. Clearly that's what's going on. Esmeralda has to go through this trial. And it's, again, one of those situations where I really thought that we were going to pull away from some things. And maybe I'm just squeamish. Okay, maybe I was just too emotionally invested in this book. And so there was like moments where I was literally on the edge of my seat, just like, okay, when is this scene going to end? Like, can you just tell me what happens and not have me watch them break Esmeralda's leg in a torture chamber situation? Because that's what happens. She refuses to admit that she murdered Phoebus and that her goat is a messenger of Satan. And so they take her to a torture chamber and they lock her up on this leather chair and break her leg. And then as soon as they break her leg, she's like, I confess to everything. I just want to die. Like, because she also thinks that Phoebus is dead, or that if Phoebus is alive, that he hates her. So she's like, I just want to die. And I confessed to everything. And yes, the part that pissed me off though, I was like, Esmeralda, okay, you can admit to witchcraft, okay, and you can die. I don't want you to, but you could. But why would you say that your goat is an agent of the devil? He hasn't done anything. It's not the goat's fault. You should have at least said, but my goat's not an agent of the devil. But she throws the goat under the bus too. And me and Gringoire are very upset about it. So Esmeralda is going to be put to death, right? Her advocate that she has tries to be like, could she just pay a fine? And they're like, no, she must die, right? And so Esmeralda is led through the street. I wasn't quite sure how things were going to end, and I was very confused because at this point we still had 3 full sections of the book left, at least like 100 or so pages left, but it really felt like as we were marching towards Esmeralda being hung at the gallows, that I was again like, am I gonna have to read Esmeralda getting hung at the gallows right now? Is nobody gonna do anything? Is nobody gonna step in? Where's Quasimodo? Why isn't he doing anything? And it was really like a long scene, long and drawn out. And also her goat was bound up in the wagon at her feet with her the whole time. So I was just like, is Esmeralda and the goat going to die right now? Is just the goat going to die? And me and Gringoire were both like, is there anything that we can do to save this goat right now? And also, oh, it's kind of sad about Esmeralda too, but all of the sympathy left my body again when Esmeralda looks at is just like when she wakes up from her stupor and is like, ah, my Phoebus. Girl, you knew him for 10 minutes? But anyways, so right before Esmeralda, literally right before she's about to get hung, Quasimodo steps in and he snatches Esmeralda up and he carries her up to Notre Dame and he claims sanctuary for her. And this is a good parallel again to the movie. I really the movie parallels the book really well in this way because similarly, this is a climactic moment where Quasimodo is accepted by the crowds of Paris who are cheering for him as he's raising Esmeralda in the air. This beautiful scene of him in front of the windows of Notre Dame holding Esmeralda up and saying sanctuary, right? And it is this idea of an individual taking justice into their own hands, right? And defending the innocent. And Notre Dame in the book kind of becomes like the symbol of that, right? Like it is this place where people, regardless of their status in society, can find that sanctuary and protection, right? So criminals, people seeking asylum, people who are outcasts and don't have anywhere else to go, right? It doesn't matter because in Notre Dame, you can live a life and you can, where you are not harassed by the oppressive forces outside, unless they get a special jurisdiction to haul you out of there. Apparently, I mean, maybe that'll happen later. Who knows? Why would I know that? And now that we've had that beautiful climactic moment, right, where Quasimodo has rescued Esmeralda and we are all like, yes, go. That's what's supposed to happen, right? End of book, right? Close the book, ended. Nope. Because we got to talk about Phoebus again, okay? Because I know that I said that maybe he was dead and I was kind of hopeful that he was dead. And again, I knew he wasn't dead because I know the end of the book, but I was kind of hopeful. No, unfortunately, Phoebus is alive, and he has decided in the months following, he ran off to go be a guard, do guard shit wherever at his garrison, and then he comes back, and he's like, you know what I want? Fleur. And so now he's all obsessed with Fleur and is like, I want to marry her and like have sex with her, whatever, and is very creepy towards Fleur. And it's like, again, very weird because like Fleur, it like wants to marry him, obviously, because it's medieval France. So she kind of has to marry someone and she needs to have a good marriage. She does not want to have sex with Phoebus. And every time they are alone together, like as soon as her mom walks out of the room, Phoebus is like on her and it's disgusting. It's gross. Okay, it's gross. But Phoebus walks out onto the balcony to try to seduce Fleur. And they're talking about, oh, I think there's an execution today. It's some kind of witch or something. I don't know who it is. And he's trying to undress Fleur. And then he looks up and realizes that the person that is about to be executed is Esmeralda. And Esmeralda sees him. And Esmeralda, before she dies, watches him walk back inside the building. This man walks back inside the building. He does not give a fuck about her at all. And Esmeralda thinks, oh, obviously he thinks that I tried to murder him. He's confused. And so he hates me because he thinks that I tried to stab him. And if he saw me, if he looked in my eyes, then he would know that I didn't try to kill him, and then we would be in love again. And then Quasimodo saves her, thank God. But I was like, girl, please be just a little bit realistic, okay? But anyways, so Quasimodo saves Esmeralda, and because Esmeralda saw Phoebus and knows that he is alive, she is very, very sad because he hates her now. Apparently. And to be fair, Phoebus does hate her, okay? Phoebus thinks that Esmeralda tried to kill him. Even though Phoebus was the one who put Frollo in the attic, so he should know that it's possible that it wasn't Esmeralda. There was another person in that room. It was the monk. Like, he literally says, like, yeah, there was also a creepy monk guy or something there. But maybe they were working together. Okay, Phoebus, whatever. Useless man. Now Esmeralda is in Notre Dame. She's in the tower. And who do we have to go back to the perspective of but Frollo? Because Frollo has been lurking this entire time. Frollo has done nothing to try to save Esmeralda from the gallows. In fact, he's put her constantly in the path of harm because he was mad that Esmeralda tried to fuck Phoebus. And so he was like, I'm gonna let her die. I guess I'm gonna let her die. And then he watches her get tortured during her trial and is mad that the torturers get to see her half naked and he has to watch it from the shadows because he's a creep, because he's a sweaty little creep. And now he feels guilty because he thinks that she's dead. So he thinks that he's being haunted by her ghost in the halls of Notre Dame. And at this point, I was happy about that. Good. He should feel guilty. And I hope that he never figures out that Esmeralda is alive. End of book. But obviously that's not what happened. Frollo figures out that Esmeralda is alive because eventually it comes out that Quasimodo is taking care of Esmeralda, right? And this is the point at which the book, again, diverges from the movie, I think in a way where the movie is much stronger, right? Because the book highlights that these two, Esmeralda and Quasimodo together, are outcast of society, and they should have sympathy for one another because Esmeralda is so forlorn and helpless, and Quasimodo is kind of like has been ostracized by society and mistreated by Frollo. But obviously Esmeralda cannot get over how uggo she thinks Quasimodo is. And so every time he appears, she's like, ah! And then she's like, no, it's okay, it's okay. But Quasimodo is like, you're right, I'm hideous. I'm going to sleep on your literal doorstep and protect you and give you this whistle that I can hear, that is at a frequency that I can hear. And if you whistle for me, like if you're mentally prepare yourself and then you can whistle for me and then I'll come. She doesn't whistle for him ever. The only time she asks him to do anything is to go and talk to Phoebus for her. And Quasimodo goes and tries to talk to Phoebus for her and be like, hey, Esmeralda's alive and she's in love with you and you should talk to her. And Phoebus thinks that Quasimodo is like a being from hell or like a being from the afterlife and is like, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to that witch. And rides off. And Quasimodo doesn't tell Esmeralda. He lets Esmeralda think that he failed in finding Phoebus because he doesn't want Esmeralda to be heartbroken again. He would rather her hate him than have to face the fact that Phoebus doesn't care about her and be heartbroken by that. Quasimodo, he does some fucked up shit later on, but he is good, right? He is a good friend and he wants things from Esmeralda, but he doesn't act on them. And he knows that wanting those things when she doesn't want him back is not okay. And he enforces those boundaries. He doesn't encroach on them. I mean, he kind of does, Okay, he's a little creepy. He's like, why can't I just watch you? He's like, just let me watch you sleep, or you'll be asleep and you won't know. And then I'll just leave. I'll leave before you wake up so that way you just won't know. Which is creepy. He shouldn't do that. But also, like, compared to the rest of the men in this book, I was like, I'll take it. Because honestly, if I was Esmeralda and I was alone and this man had rescued me, why are you not even, at least just try to be his friend? Like, he's just a little weird. He's got a heart of gold, okay? But Esmeralda doesn't really want anything to do with Quasimodo, and so she doesn't call on him until Frollo shows up. Frollo is like, obviously, I have to attack Esmeralda while she's sleeping. And he's begging her on his knees, like at her feet, just like, let me touch your feet, or even just like look kindly at me. Give me some kind of sign. Let me save you. Let me love you. And it made me viscerally ill how much this man was throwing himself at Esmeralda's feet. And the one good thing that Esmeralda does in this book is that every single turn, she tells Frodo that she would literally rather die than like give him even the time of day. And I respected her, the hell out of her for that, because she could have, you know, been like, sure, we can go off together. You can save me. She could have let Frollo use his power and social standing to protect her. And she didn't, because he is a fucked up, sweaty creep. And she knew that. And she stood on business. And I respect that. And Quasimodo also stood on business. Frollo wants him to portray Esmeralda, and Quasimodo knows that that's wrong. And because Esmeralda was kind to him when no one else was, and she doesn't deserve to be mistreated by Frollo. And so Quasimodo is like, I will not lay a hand on Frollo, but I also won't let him hurt. Yeah, I won't let you hurt Esmeralda either. And so they're kind of like at a stalemate. And Frollo is pissed because he knows that Quasimodo is physically stronger than him. And also Frollo knows that he's fucking in the wrong, right? And that he's going to have to do some more scheming in order for Esmeralda to potentially give him the time of day. Frollo starts to try to come up with a plan, and his great plan is that he is going to circle back to our old buddy Gringoire and try to convince Gringoire that he should switch places with Esmeralda, because the king is coming. Somebody tipped off the king that Esmeralda is alive and is like, I want that witch to die. Wonder who that could have been. And so the king is now going to violate the sanctity of Notre Dame and snatch Esmeralda out so that way they can execute her. They're going to like nullify a sanctuary for her. And so Frollo goes to Gringoire and is like, hey, you should switch places with Esmeralda and you should get hung in her place because Esmeralda saved your life that one time. And so like, you know, you would just be repaying your debt to her. And Gringoire's like, oh, Esmeralda's alive. Sick. Is her goat alive? And also, I don't want to do that. So Gringoire comes up with this other plan, which is insane. And when I say insane, I mean, in theory, respect. But in practice, with what Gringoire had actually planned, fuck Gringoire, okay? Because Gringoire goes to the Court of Miracles and convinces the outcasts, like all of the Court of Miracles gang, right? Like everybody in there to go to Notre Dame and to get Esmeralda and get her out of the city, right? And so they come together, including Frollo's brother, Jehan, who after having his last argument with Frollo is literally like, okay, fuck my brother. I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to be an outcast now. And he goes to the Court of Miracles and is like, I'm one of you. And the Court of Miracles is like, yeah, you seem like a vibe, so why not? Right? So he's there drinking and he's like, yeah, let's go get Esmeralda because I'm one of the Court of Miracles people now. And so they all, Clopin and the Court of Miracles people, the Romani, all of the like beggars in the city, all of the outcasts, they start marching through the streets. and they are like, we are going to take over the church. We are going to get Esmeralda out. We are not going to let her be a victim of this cruel and unjust state. And I was living for it. I was like, yeah, you go get Esmeralda. She's one of your own. Rise up against the authority that is oppressing you and take them down. But it was too good to be true, right? They get absolutely demolished. And who do they get demolished by? Quasimodo. Quasimodo starts killing these people left and right. You know the scene in the movie when like the French people, when Phoebus gives that speech and the French people rise up to, again, join with the outcasts, the Court of Miracles folks, and overthrow the oppressive French judicial system and like the guards and the forces that have been oppressing them the whole movie. In the book, they don't do. They're not fighting. They're not fighting against the French state. They are fighting against literally just Quasimodo, right? And that scene in the movie where Quasimodo is like making fire rain down from Notre Dame and throwing rocks like onto the guards and things. Yeah, no, he's doing that to the Court of Miracles people who I had grown unfairly attached to throughout the course of the book for really no other reason than I just liked their alternative society that they had formed outside of the bounds of the unfair and unjust judicial system presented to me in the book. Yeah, Quasimodo is like literally like squashing people like grapes. And one of the people that he squashes like a grape is Jehan, because Jehan has this heroic moment where he's like, we're going to go get Esmeralda. I got a ladder. We're ready to go. And Jehan is climbing up and he gets all the way up and he's like ready to fight. And then he sees Quasimodo, realizes that he's incredibly outmatched. Quasimodo scoops him up and literally breaks him like an eggshell. And Frollo sees it and is like, yikes, that was my brother. And basically, I caused that because this was Frollo's idea. This is editing, Mallory. I just didn't want to go back and set up my entire setup. I literally am like uploading the video and then I realized I forgot to mention, oh my God, in the fight scene, like when I was saying that everybody dies, I don't think I mentioned that Clopin Truffaut dies. He absolutely gets cut down by these soldiers. And I was so sad about it because he was low-key, like, besides the goat, like, my favorite character. And I was really sad that he died, and I was really rooting for him to completely destroy all of these French forces and, like, I don't know, take over all of Paris because I was, like, I was rooting for him, and he absolutely died. Like, all of the fun little Court of Miracle characters that even got named at all, dead, crushed. So just so you know, if you were like, oh, she didn't mention Clopin, maybe he didn't die. He did die. And I just needed you to know because I needed you to be sad about it because I also was really sad about it. Anyways, back to the video. In the defense of Quasimodo, Quasimodo does not understand what is going on. He doesn't know who these people are. He doesn't know why they're coming to Notre Dame. He knows that they're there for Esmeralda, but doesn't really understand why, right? Nobody clued him into this plan because if they had, Quasimodo wouldn't have let Esmeralda go because he knows that Frollo wants bad things for her. And Gringoire, I guess, doesn't know that or doesn't care. And so Esmeralda is led out of Notre Dame as Quasimodo is fighting with this French force, or as Quasimodo is fighting with the outcasts. Esmeralda is led out of Notre Dame by Gringoire and this mysterious hooded man. Wonder who that could be. Obviously, it's Frollo, and they're like they go across the river, and Gringoire is just glad that they have the goat. And I'm glad that Gringoire has the goat, but also then Gringoire immediately fucks off. The moment that the guards, it becomes clear that the guards are going to catch up with them, and that Esmeralda, when she realizes it's Frollo, wants nothing to do with him. Gringoire realizes he can't save Esmeralda and the goat, so he chooses the goat. He's like, I don't know what to do to save Esmeralda. I'm going to save the goat. And so he leaves And we don't see him for the rest of the book. He lives happily ever after with the goat and becomes a poet. The end for him. But Esmeralda is stuck on this boat with Frollo. And Quasimodo has realized that Esmeralda is missing, but doesn't know where she is, and is frantically looking for her in Notre Dame, but will not reach her in time. Because Esmeralda is stuck with Frollo, who takes her literally in front of the gallows where she was almost hung and tells her, choose me or your pyre. But this time it's a gallows because they don't burn her. But he's literally like, choose me or choose death. And she says, I would rather literally die. Literally die than be with you. And he remember that little old recluse lady who was like, you will walk the gallows to your death, I curse you. Well, Frollo's like, hey, grab her. And the lady, because she like backed Esmeralda up, I guess, to where the widow lady's little like cell was. And he's like, grab her. So she shoots her hand out of the bars and he grabs her. And Gudul grabs her. And then Frollo's like, I'm going to go get the guards. Gudul, you hold on to her. And Frollo leaves. Because we have to have this moment of the reveal of, oh my God, would you believe it? Gudul is Esmeralda's mom because Esmeralda was white this whole time. Because, of course, she had to be, right? Like, blah, 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 blah. I talked about it earlier. I don't need to rant about it. And Gudul, like, loses her mind. She pries open the bars with superhuman strength and she pulls Esmeralda inside to hide her from the guards. And Esmeralda is like, crying, sobbing because she's found her mother and it's like what she waited the whole book for, whatever. But Frollo shows back up. And who does he show back up with? This guard named Tristan, like the captain of the guard named Tristan. And also Phoebus. Okay? And Phoebus is really only interested in quelling the masses. Like now that they're at the point where they're like executing somebody, he's like, I don't really care about that at all. And so he turns around to leave. And as he's walking away, as the others are looking for Esmeralda and Gudul has tried her best to lead them astray, Esmeralda says, Phoebus, wait. From her hiding place. She says, Phoebus, wait. And do you think Phoebus turns around? No. He doesn't hear her. And if he did, he wouldn't care. And so they find her. And they grab her. And read her. She dies. They drag her, like Frollo goes back to Notre Dame. Right, because he doesn't want to watch Esmeralda die. He's like, this is, my work is done, right? Like, she's going to face justice, and she's going to be out of my life. She's not going to be able to pick anybody else, because she didn't pick me, so she has to die. So he goes back to Notre Dame, and he watches it from the bell tower with Quasimodo, who has now realized, right, that Frollo is back, and Esmeralda is not there. And he's looking out, and he sees someone about to be hung, and he realizes that it's Esmeralda. And he loves Esmeralda, right? Like, he tells Frollo, if you are going to do something bad to Esmeralda, kill me first so that I don't have to live with that, right? Like, he doesn't want to go against Frollo, but he doesn't want to hurt Esmeralda either. But now in this moment, watching Esmeralda literally die, and you do watch her die. She gets hung by the state. By Tristan, the king's man. She gets hung by the king's man. Quasimodo pushes Frollo off of Notre Dame. And Frollo catches himself. But Quasimodo just lets him hang there and lets him fall. It's not like the movie.
And he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into the fiery pit.
where Frollo was trying to kill Quasimodo. And so it's just no, this was cold-blooded. This was like, you deserve to die. And honestly, he did. I'm not the kind of person, I mean, I don't know if in real life I would feel that way, but like in the book, I was like, there is no, like, because Frollo literally, you're in his mind, and you know that even as he's watching like Esmeralda, and she is dead, right? She has been hung and she is hanging there dead, and her mother is screaming, or her mother died as well, like at her feet screaming. And you have to like read her mother, who has just found her daughter, screaming for them to spare her daughter, and then watch her die. And Frollo in his mind is just like, I would have done it again. I wouldn't have done anything differently. I hate that she's dead, but she had to die. And so I'm glad that Frollo died, man. Because evil motherfucker. He's evil in the book too. I mean, he's evil in the movie too, but it's like a different level, I think, being inside of his head. And he is so creepy and so evil. Like, yikes. Like, just obsessed to the point of like, he has to have his view of the world. He has to have everything that he wants. Everything that he wants. And if something doesn't go his way, if the world's not bend to his will because he believes that he should have it, that he deserves it and he's earned it, if the world doesn't bend to his will that way, then that world can't exist. Those people can't exist, right? Outside of that norm, outside of that, of his, if they're not on the right and moral path. And he has lost everything at this point, right? Like, he knows that his brother is dead. He knows that he's hurt Quasimodo. He knows that he's betrayed his priesthood. And he knows that he killed Esmeralda and Esmeralda's mom, not to mention all those people out in the street. And he doesn't care because he didn't get what he wanted. And if he can't get what he wants, because he has power, he has all the power in the world, all the knowledge in the world, and it doesn't matter, and it can't get him what he wants, then the whole world has to burn. And that's a dark villain, right? That's a dark mentality to have, right? Because the rest of the book, right? It's these things happening, like it's these systems happening that are set up to be unfair and cruel and impersonal that have put Esmeralda in their path. But the like finale of the book, like the ultimate reason that she's put in those situations is because of a man who couldn't handle the fact that Esmeralda with the little choice that Esmeralda had, the only choice that she had in the entire book really was to say no to Frollo. Her only choice was to deny him. He couldn't handle it. He had everything else over her, and he couldn't handle that. The one thing that he couldn't take away from her, her literal choice to love him or not to love him, could not be allowed to exist. But that's not the end of the book. Okay, the end of the book is that later on, right, they're excavating these graves. They find these two bodies together they're excavating the graves of these condemned criminals, and they find these two bodies together, and they realize that one of them was not a criminal because their neck bone, whatever that's called, was not broken. But that person has a crooked spinal column and is wrapped around the body of what looks like a smaller skeleton, probably a woman, and did die by hanging because her neck was broken. And when they try to pull the skeletons apart, the one with the crooked spinal column crumbles into dust. And that's how the book ends. Right? So Quasimodo has gone down and died with Esmeralda because he was tormented by her death and didn't really know how to live in a world like that. Which honestly fair, because the book was really dark and really bleak, and it is like, and oh my God. Oh, and also So we've got Quasimodo, who literally is like, I don't know how to live in a world that is so unjust and so unfair that they would kill someone like Esmeralda. And like, and that's just something. And then people just move on, right? And then you have Phoebus, who gets married. That's literally like the line in the book is, and Phoebus had a bad ending too because he got married. So fuck Phoebus. But that's the end of the book. It really does go back to that kind of like message of romanticism of like, or that idea, it really goes back to that idea of the Ananke, which Victor Hugo was trying to like nail in, the idea of like, you can't escape this fate that's been written. But, right, Notre Dame is kind of in the book like this thing that witnesses all of these beautiful and horrible things, the passage through time. And because Notre Dame is there, we have a way to kind of like tell these stories or imagine what they could be. Because if Notre Dame wasn't there, if Victor Hugo hadn't seen those words, I mean, at least his premise of the book is that he saw Ananke like carved into the wall or whatever. I don't think he really did. I think he made it up. But, he saw it carved into the wall and it was like, let me find the story or let me tell you the story of why it was there or whatever, But because he saw the words and they were preserved and they were there, we were able to hear the story of Quasimodo and Esmeralda when we wouldn't have otherwise, right? So it's important to protect these institutions because they honor not just like these bigger ideas of like art and culture of France and like the spirit of France, but that spirit of France is also like the stories of people who society forgets and who society doesn't like have a place for, at least that was what I took away from it.
And I really struggled with how to end this video. I've talked a lot about this idea of an Anke, right? So this idea that we are moved along by these like forces of fate and we don't have a say necessarily in what comes to happen. That feeling of suffering tied to one's fate, right? And I think, in the narrative, it very much feels like there are people that have choices and people that don't. And, right, I said that the only choice that Esmeralda gets to make in the book is the choice of whether or not she loves Frollo. And in some ways, that's true, right? It is the one semblance of agency that she has in this book is the choice to choose whether to be with Frollo or not. But at the end of the day, I think the reason that I've really struggled with how to end this video is that at the end of the day, that's still no choice at all, right? We know this. The choice between freedom and death is not really a choice, right? Either Esmeralda has to give up her autonomy, her body, her freedom, or she is not allowed to exist in this world. And I think we know that the choice between Esmeralda's choice is not really, it's a false one. The choice between freedom and death, the choice between giving everything away to this person with power over you is not living a life. It's not really living a life, right? And Esmeralda knows that. I mean, maybe she doesn't know that, right? She just wants to be with Phoebus, and it is what it is. But I think we know that, right? That we are very much presented in the book that the life that she would have with Frollo is obviously, it's not one that she wants, and death would be better. So what does that say? But it's still at the same time, it's not really a choice. And it just, as I'm trying to wrap this up and come up with like a takeaway, and I told you that I would try to make it so that things were positive at the end, it makes me so
just like profoundly sad, right? That the only choice given to any of these people without power, right? Every single marginalized person in this book, the only choice that they're given is to either give up their freedom or to die, right? To exist as the powers that be tell them that they have to exist, or to try to fight back in the case of the outcasts, or to say no in the case of Esmeralda, or to just resign yourself from the cruelty of the world like Quasimodo, right? Every choice that they're given is this false one that ends either in the death of their identity and their autonomy, or in their actual physical death. And I think that's why the book is just so, obviously it's really got me in my head, because it's just, I think I've been feeling like that too, just honestly, right? With the way that the world is. Are those the choices that we have too, right? To comply or die? Is that the best that the world has to offer us, right? To sacrifice our freedom and our humanity and our compassion just because it isn't what the powers that be think that we should do, that we should give them every single thing that they want without question, without hesitation, or we can't be allowed to exist either. What do you do in a world like that? And Victor Hugo doesn't give us an answer, right? In the text, really. I don't know. I guess I just want to let you know that I think I too struggle with it. I guess Victor Hugo struggled with it. Like I said earlier, we are who we've always been. I don't know if that means that that's who we'll always be, right? And you don't either, right? None of us do. It hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean that it will always be bad, right? Because I guess the hopeful thing to take away is that Victor Hugo wrote this book with a purpose, right? He wrote it to try to save this building, right? At the end of the day, this book is a book about people, but it's also a book about a building. And his book did work, right? Like Notre Dame, they did restore it. It did become a symbol of France. And Victor Hugo, while not perfect, far from it, right? Obviously, right, wrote books full of weird stereotypes and sometimes had very colonialist perspectives, but also advocated for justice and revolution and fairness and abolition, right? He wrote a letter to the states when they were going to execute John Brown, saying that it was wrong because John Brown was on the side of freedom and it would be a stain on America's legacy if they executed him. And and when he died, millions of people came to his funeral. And I don't think Victor Hugo knew that at the time. I mean, maybe had hopes that he would be recognized for something bigger, but he didn't know that he hoped, right? And other romantic writers at the time hoped that they would save Notre Dame. They hoped that France would get better and justice would prevail, and right, that the government would be a government by the people. That was their hope, right? So I don't know. I feel bad that we've gotten all the way to the end, and I had a whole other ending filmed, and it just feels like, just watching it back, I can just really tell that I was just really struggling to try to find like a positive spin on things. And I'll cut back to it so you can see some of it, but I don't know. I think the message to take away is all of the things that I've talked about this whole time, right? That these justice systems can feel so unfair, and it can feel like there's not a place for you. But also at the same time, I think the fact that we still read books like this, the fact that we still talk about stories like this, the fact that stories like this impact us, I think it also shows that we're also all trying to find a place for each other too. And I hope that someday we'll have something better or something. And until we have something better, I'm here for you. And I see you. And I'm sorry I couldn't make a happier video. Yeah, so now we're going to cut back to happier Mallory from earlier. So happy Mallory's coming back. We'll end out the video. It's a positive note, a little silly. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And you know, yeah. To wrap it all up, right? We've gone on this journey together, and I've left you in a very depressing place. But I will say, the movie has a much less depressing ending, okay? I mean, depressing in some ways because Esmeralda and Phoebus end up together, and now I'm not going to be able to watch that without feeling like I want to puke after having read the book. But Esmeralda and Phoebus end up together, and Quasimodo is embraced by the community, right? At the end, Esmeralda, as they've beaten Frollo, the townspeople are all cheering because the French people have come together to kind of like get rid of Frollo, who was this corrupt influence of like the state, like enacting unfair justice on people who with less power in the community, right? And so the community welcomes Quasimodo, and the little girl, like at the end, goes up to him and like touches his face. And like when I was rewatching it, I was tearing up at the end because I was like, yeah, that's beautiful and happy and what I needed. And the dark, twisty version is probably a little bit more realistic to the real world, but I don't know, sometimes we need a happy ending. I will say too, if you want a perfect blend of the Disney version and Hugo's version, I think honestly the best version of this story is the Disney musical, like Broadway version. Which you can probably find a slime tutorial of on YouTube. I found a free version on YouTube that a student company did, and it was really good. But yeah, that version, it still has the tragic ending, but it also keeps the heart of Quasimodo and the character of Esmeralda from the movie, and I think more strongly reflects those themes of justice and right, like we might not prevail today, but maybe we'll prevail tomorrow, that I think is really powerful. And I think is kind of lacking in the book because Quasimodo and Esmeralda don't prevail. The only person that really prevails is Gringoire because he's a poet and he gets to keep doing poet shit. The point is, after going through all of that together, I think reading it in this moment in time, for me, I think one of the things that really resonates with me about this piece of media in all of its forms is this idea of justice being something that you have to fight for and also something that you don't always get to see, right? Especially in the musical, that idea of like, this world is cruel, but it's the only one we've got. And the idea of like, someday the world will be better. Someday, you know, the people in need will be taken care of, and the people who are greedy and powerful and exert that power over other people unfairly won't win. And that day might not be today, but we can work together towards it in the future, right? And I think that's why this piece of media has really like spoken to me for so long. I know that's why it spoke to me as a kid, because I really felt deeply as a kid growing up in the Christian South. You know, I saw the effect of like a church that was corrupt and didn't care about people and used its authority to make other people feel lesser than, right? And constantly wanting to believe in those ideas, kind of the ideas of Notre Dame, right? The idea of like sanctuary and community and help, and those ideas not being true, right? Like those ideas being constantly thwarted by the reality of people instead using their power to get what they wanted. And if they couldn't have what they wanted, inflicting great harm on the people that dared to make a different choice than what they wanted them to make. And sometimes things don't end happily. But we gotta keep going anyways. And there are people with so much power that will cause so much harm to people just because they are angry that there is something broken inside of them. But in spite of the fact that it can feel like you are being buffeted by the winds of fate, right? We all still have choices. And maybe those choices wouldn't have made a difference, but maybe they would have. And I guess that's how I'm going to wrap up the video. But if you've read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, if you've watched the movie, if you've watched the musical, I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I would love to hear what you use to cope during your Gothic Girl winter. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate that. You can check out my one other video. One day, maybe someday, I will actually write a script for these videos and do more research and to be a better video essayist. But I think the question is, what makes a monster and what makes a man? Sing the bells, 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 bells. Anyways, bye.